So this next speaker is somebody you probably have heard of before if you pay attention in the keto world. Her name is Dr. Kristie Sullivan, and she's going to talk about this whole idea that we're on a fad diet. Who thinks you're on a fad diet? Who thinks you're not on a fad diet? All right, Kristie, you have no reason to come. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome, Dr. Kristie Sullivan.
Thank you. Hi. Hey, good morning. I seriously cannot see you guys, right? So if you're making faces at me, that's all great. I am so excited to be here. I am nervous. I just am going to own that. I have spoken at conferences, like all over, professional conferences, and this just is weird to me. But I keep reminding myself I'm with my people. These are my keto people. I am Kristie Sullivan, a PhD. My PhD is in Educational Research and Policy Analysis from North Carolina State University. It has nothing to do with a ketogenic diet, but it pays the bills. I want to share with you some before and after photos of me and my journey to eating low-carb, high-fat. So this was me in 1997. That's not my baby. That is the daughter of my best friend. She had come down to visit me. I was trying to think my age. I was 29 years old. I weighed over 300 pounds. I was still 5'0". I haven't lost any inches in that time. And in this picture, I am mortified that she's actually taking my photograph. This was just a few months before I decided to do gastric bypass surgery. I had been overweight since I was 3 years old. I have been hungry my entire life. I remember sneaking food from the refrigerator, cheese. I would get the cheese out of the fridge, and then my mom would say, "Who is eating all the cheese?" Well, that would have been me. I was always hungry, and so by the time I was 29, I was over 300 pounds. So I had gastric bypass surgery, and this was me 8 years later. I had lost from 313 to 178, and then slowly started gaining the weight back. Had gotten married and had a daughter. That's my Gracie. So if you watch any of my videos, you'll see she's 14 now, but that was my Gracie. And so after that, I felt like such a failure, a complete failure. I was still hungry all the time, but I'd had gastric bypass. I had gone to this very extreme surgery that altered my body, and I still was fighting obesity. Felt like a complete and total failure. So I did what most of us have done. I decided I would do Weight Watchers, and my husband did Weight Watchers, and I counted points. And after 2 years of off and on Weight Watchers, this is my after. I continued to gain weight, and I was always hungry. Anybody else do the Weight Watcher thing? Yeah, I remember 24 points. I had 24 points. I usually had used all of them up by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was hungry and grumpy and miserable. And my husband got 3,700 points, and he was losing 30 pounds a week, and it took me 3 months to lose 10. So that's me on Weight Watchers. After that, I decided I was never counting points again, and I would do what my doctor told me to do. I would do low fat and caloric restriction. So this is after that. That is me holding my son at Disney World. I was sweating profusely. It was January in Orlando, which I think has to be one of the hottest places on earth whenever you go. I was exhausted. It was the end of the day, and he was a little tired too, but you can look at how I'm dressed. I remember in each of these photographs exactly what size clothing I was wearing. That blue shirt was a 3X, and it was something that would just cover me physically. Those pants were size 24 jeans. In June of 2013, I I had reached that desperate place again. I had actually gone to a meeting to see about having gastric bypass revised because that is what one of my doctors had recommended, my OBGYN. She said, your weight is out of control, and I had had difficulties having children, and so she told me to go back and have the gastric bypass revised. I did not want to do that. I did go to a meeting. I didn't want to do that for whatever reason. So I decided that in this time, see what you don't know, from 2007 to 2011, I finished a PhD. I had done a master's degree prior to 1997. I had done professionally everything I ever wanted to do. I had published papers, I had traveled internationally, spoken at international conferences, was a consultant. So by all these standards, I had been successful in most areas of my life. This was the one area I could not control. So I spent a lot of time, besides being hungry, wondering what was wrong with me. Why couldn't I do this? So in June of 2013, we had been to a wedding, and at this wedding, women older than I were wearing beautiful dresses, beautiful sleeveless dresses. It was a summer outdoor wedding, and they looked amazing. And these women, a lot of them were older than I was. I was there in a frumpy, 3/4 length sleeve pink suit that was a size 24. And I was miserable. I was embarrassed about my size. I didn't want to dance with my husband. I felt terrible for him. I was embarrassed that he had brought me to the wedding. And I decided that he deserved more. In between here, I have scoliosis of the spine, and I had had increasing back issues. And so I was in a lot of pain. I'd seen a neurologist, and I had been on 3 different medications for my back, had done physical therapy, and had, in July of 2012, had gotten an epidural steroid injection. Those are no fun. It had helped for maybe a month or 2, and that was it. So in addition to feeling really bad about my weight, I had limited mobility. I worked full-time and at a mostly desk, and so my employer actually bought me a desk that raised so I could stand and work at my desk through the day. It's still, by the time I got home and fixed dinner, often my back hurt so badly that I might fix dinner and go straight to bed. Often my husband would act as a walker. He'd hold his arms out. I would grasp his forearms, and he walked backwards and walked me to bed. I was in bed by 7 p.m. most nights because the back pain was so unbelievable. My children were young at the time. I could not go upstairs to tuck them in bed. They would come to my bedroom, kiss me goodnight, go off to bed, and then my husband would go upstairs to tuck them in bed. I decided that June that they deserved better. They deserved a mom who could do things. They deserved a mom who didn't sit in the car while they went on hikes to see waterfalls. They deserved a mom that could go to school and volunteer, and who wouldn't run the risk of embarrassing them with their classmates. Now, my children never complained about any of this, but in my mind, I was not who they deserved. The same was true for my husband. He deserved an attractive wife who was active, who could do things, who didn't go to bed at 7 p.m. and force him to end up cleaning the kitchen, helping the children to bed, and those kinds of things. I started to pick out the wife I wanted him to have when I was no longer there, because I decided I was going to lose weight or die trying. With the emphasis on die trying, I ordered supplements. Bromelain, I started going to the medical literature. I had read that bromelain helped with lipolysis, with fat burning, and I ordered bromelain. I started taking that without any concern that it might be contraindicated with the other medications that I took. I can tell you that in June 2013, I, for 2 weeks, did a very low-calorie, low-fat diet. The first week went okay, although I was starving. I was hungry and miserable and deprived, but I probably lost 5 pounds that first week. And the second week, I lost nothing. I was even exercising. And I'm going to tell you, when you weigh, at that point I was probably 263, 268. When you weigh that much, for me, just putting on clothes to go to the gym was a horrifying experience because you don't look good in the clothes. You're very self-conscious. But I was working out, doing my cardio. I was determined. I had done everything else I'd ever wanted to accomplish. I was determined I was going to do this too. At the end of the second week, when I lost no weight and had logged everything in an app, everything I had eaten, I called a friend of mine on the way to work, and I told her how desperate I was. And I said, it's been a week, I've not lost any weight. And she essentially said, it's not always about the calories. And that was really magical to me. She told me about a book by Gary Taubes, Why We Get Fat. You ever heard of that one? I went into my office on June 19th and ordered that book. Amazon Prime had it to me in 2 days. And so it was the end of June when I started low carb, high fat. And here's the after picture. This was the legacy I was leaving for my daughter. Our life before low carb, high fat was pretty grim, to be honest. You can see that she got mom's metabolism in this picture. She's drinking a Pepsi, which we never did. We were at Disney World, and this was a treat for her. She was the child who packed the low-fat cheese, the low-fat ham in her preschool lunchbox, or I packed it for her. And she was the child in kindergarten who always picked water. All the other kids, I'll never forget, school party, Grace picked water out of the cooler. All the other kids picked soft drinks, but she was the only child who was overweight. That was the legacy I had for her at that point. When I started doing low carb, high fat, the weight just seemed to melt off, as many of you know. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hungry. Called my best friend the third day and was like, I forgot to eat lunch. I can't believe this. It was 3 o'clock. I was at work. I ended up just not even eating until the next day. So for the first time, I wasn't hungry. And the first probably 75 pounds, I really only counted a carbohydrate. I didn't even understand macros. I just knew that this worked for me. And as many of you know, that people start to notice that. And I'm telling you this part of the story because a friend of mine, and I think you all know him, and I'll tell you who he is later, but a friend of mine, when I shared my story about weight loss, said, yeah, okay, Kristie, it's great. You've lost, over 100 pounds. You've kept it off for 4 years. That's all fabulous, but that's not your story. This next part that I'm going to share with you is what he says is my story. So people had seen me struggle all my life, started asking me, what are you doing? And you know how it is. You feel so good. You've got this energy, and you're not hungry, and you're losing weight, and you're eating the most amazing food of your life. You're eating bacon and steak and butter, and it's incredible. And so friends started asking me what I was doing. So I started teaching classes, local classes, and how to do this. And I had to be really careful because I'm not a nutritionist and I'm not a medical doctor. In fact, my children say, our mom's a doctor, but not the kind who can help anybody. So I started teaching classes, and to provide support for the people in the class, I opened a Facebook group. And I limited the group to people I knew in real life. Well, first I limited it to the class, and then later I opened it to people I knew in real life. So I had to know you in real life, or you had to know someone who was in the group. That was about 2 years ago. Can y'all see this number? We have over 100,000 members in this group now. The other thing that happened was a really dear friend of mine who is an amazing professional woman with 3 children who are the busiest children. They're busier than my children. And she needed this. She was weighing close to 400 pounds. And she begged me to do videos for her. She couldn't come to the classes. And I knew she couldn't. It didn't matter if I had done them Sunday night at midnight. She couldn't come. And so I agreed to do videos for her. And I was posting them in the group. And they were on my phone, my cell phone. And eventually it got full. And my brother calls me and says, you need to put these on YouTube. And I said, no. And he said, no, really, just put them on YouTube. It's easy, and it'll be there for people to see. And you can, just reference it instead of putting it in the group, and it's hard to find. So when the storage on my phone got full, I said, okay, I'm sitting at the kitchen table on a Sunday. My husband's washing the lunch dishes because he still cleans up the kitchen for me. And I say, okay, so what do I call this? And he says, call it Cooking Keto with Kristie. And I clicked through, and that's what I did. So that's how much thought this got. When I did this the other day, we're at 45,000 subscribers there. Guys, I've never advertised this. I don't put it out there. I've never tried to grow it. I put it out there to help a friend, and people started finding it. My husband, when we hit 1,000 subscribers, my husband said, I don't get it. Why are they watching you? I don't know. I don't get it either. And I did. It took me 3 or 4 months to tell my failure story. And but the time I started the YouTube channel and then actually shared that story. And people have asked me, why do you call it your failure story? You finally had success. If it hadn't been for all of those failures for so many years, I never would have been desperate enough. I never would have made this work. So that's why I call it my failure story. Other things, so eventually people said to me, yeah, YouTube's great, but I don't want to listen to you. No, YouTube's great, but it uses my data. I want a book. I want something to hold in my hands. And so I self-published. Y'all, this is the funniest story because I did know what I was doing. I had done it in a Word document. A colleague came by my office. She saw it, and she's like, no, you've got to do this in InDesign. Half the pictures are just done like with a cell phone because I never intended to do a cookbook. And so anyway, and this picture was taken in my kitchen, my husband with a camera. I really did not know what I was doing. I hit approve proof on Amazon, and then my phone started lighting up and people were going, we bought your book. So I had approved the proof and published it on Amazon without knowing. And the book did really well. It was #1 in cookbooks for a couple weeks on Amazon and hit 63 in all the books. Since then, that's part of the group, but I've started working with the Diet Doctor. And if you've ever been on their website, dietdoctor.com, I have so much respect for Andreas Seinfeld and his team. I think of them like consumer reports. They provide really great information and they're like a clearinghouse of just a lot of resources that you can trust. And he works really hard to make sure that he approaches it with integrity. He doesn't take any sponsorships. And the entire site is funded by subscription. It's $9.99 a month, and so he wants to make it really affordable for folks. And when he talked to me about writing for him or working with him, he said, we can empower a lot of people together. And that really spoke to my heart because I do this because I struggled my entire life. And I see other people struggling, and I want to tell them, you don't have to struggle. This is the easiest thing ever. You don't have to be hungry. You just have to find the right foods for your body. So it's been really a lot of fun to be a part of his team, and those are some more folks in his team, and I just have to pinch myself that I can be a part of that. So that is who I am. And that is why it's so important to me that low carb, high fat not be considered a fad diet. My own physician, my former physician, asked me a year and a half ago, is this sustainable? I was sitting in his office. He had been my physician for over a decade. The entire time he had been my physician, I had been morbidly obese. He was the physician who wrote the referral for me to see the neurologist for the pain meds. He knew that I was on, he wrote my prescriptions for most of those pain meds. He knew I was getting epidural steroid injections. And he asked me after 3 years, is this sustainable? And I knew it was time to find a new doctor. But I also know that I am incredibly stubborn. And that one of the biggest criticisms I hear about low carb, high fat is it isn't sustainable. In fact, on my last visit to my neurologist, I went for just a checkup because I continue to have some funky things going on with my back. And when I went to see him, he had my chart. And he's looking at the chart and he's looking at me. And he's looking at the chart, and he's looking at me, and he says, "You've lost a lot of weight." "Yes, sir." "You're not on any of these meds anymore?" "No." You're not getting the epidural steroid injections?" "No." "Well, you look great. What are you doing?" And I told him with a little bit of fear what I was doing, and he got so excited. His face lit up and he said, "Oh man, a ketogenic diet is fantastic. I wish all my patients would eat a ketogenic diet. It's so good for you. It's anti-inflammatory." And he's going on and on. And so I get excited and I say, "Do you follow a ketogenic diet too?" And he says, "Oh no, it's too damn hard. I like bread too much." That's what he told me. I haven't seen him since. Fortunately, I haven't needed him. But part of my platform then is what I like to do is to make it sustainable, to make it easy. And that's where the stubborn part of me comes in. And I think there's some keys to sustainability for those of us who follow a low-carb, high-fat diet. And I think that the first is know the whys. Know the whys. There are a lot of whys. The first why is, why does it work? Why does it work? Why does it matter that we restrict carbohydrate very low? Why does it matter that, especially in the beginning, you want to keep your fat high? Why does it matter that some of us especially need to keep our protein moderate? When you understand why it works, it's far, far, far more easy to stay on plan. So you've got to understand the very basic science behind it. The other why I think that you have to understand to make this sustainable is, why am I doing it? Why does this matter to me? It matters to me personally because of the amazing health I have and because of what I'm able to give to my family now. I'm still not the mom I want to be. I'm still not always the wife that my husband deserves. But I am terrified of going back to that 263 or 300-pound person again. That is my why. When the reason I do this, I choose to do this every single day. You got to create new habits. When our kids were toddlers, and you probably did this if you have children, your kids pick up something dangerous and they're running around with it. When you take it away from them, you don't just grab it away. You replace it with something, right? You give them a block that's safe or a soft toy. You give them something that it's okay to play with. We got to create new habits. When a doctor, in some cases, says you've got to do low carb, high fat to control your blood glucose, they take away a lot. We tend to look at it from a deficit model. You get up the next day, you're standing in your kitchen, and you're like, well, I can't have bread, I can't have toast, I can't have cereal, I can't have bagels. What can I have? That's where I've tried to really focus, is helping people create those new habits. Here, eat this. We are a busy family, like so many of you. I had 5 meals that I went to that I always had, usually in the freezer. I bet you can guess what they were. Frozen lasagna, chicken tenders, right? Those kinds of things. Spaghetti, that didn't work. I had to create new habits. So one of the things that I did in creating new habits was go to Pinterest. I would find recipes, I pinned them in like low carb, high fat breakfast, low carb, high fat main meals, low carb, high fat soups, low carb, high fat treats. And then when I made any of those desserts, I would move that recipe, that pen, over to a board called Recipes, Low Carb, High Fat, Tried and True. When I put it in Tried and True, I knew I'd made it, and then I made notes about it. I made pancakes. My son really loved it. My husband wouldn't touch it. I made this recipe. Everybody loved it, but it needed more spice. So whatever note I made, I had that for a reference. And I made a commitment to make 2 new recipes per week. And by doing those 2, I started to build a new habits. I started to build kind of go-to recipes that worked for my family. Embrace the joy. So many times we focus on what we can't have. I can't have pasta. I can't have potatoes. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but I eat the best foods of my life, and you probably do too. And part of that joy is I can have bacon, and I don't have to have 2 pieces of bacon. I can have 4, 5, or 6, especially if I get to the kitchen first, right? Embracing the joy too for me, and this is so huge, is embracing the joy of the things that I can do with my family. I do not take for granted being able to go up the stairs to tuck my children in. My daughter's 14, and until she goes to college, she's getting tucked in every night of her life. And I'm not sure I won't be sneaking in outside the dorm room. Embracing the joy for me is what this lifestyle has given me. Last summer, we were in California together, my family. We went to Yosemite. We went on a hike of Upper Yosemite Falls, and I did it fasted. I could not have begun to do that 4 years ago, and I didn't miss out on that. We had amazing pictures. Influencers, and I'm going to wrap up because I'm running out of time. I am now called an influencer, which is weird to me, and I'm still coming to terms with what that means. But as far as being an influencer, we're those who are helping others, and a lot of you are influencers too. May not have the reach that some have, but all of us are influencers because people are watching us. And I think we have to approach this with professionalism, responsibility, and consistency. And what I mean by that is people watch me, they see what I put on my plate all the time. They see what I say about, is it okay to go off plan? I'm one of those people that I can't go off plan. I don't recommend it for anyone. And I could talk about that for another 20 minutes. But the whole idea of going off plan is it sends you to a place where cravings are worse. It's like going to the beach. And if you've ever been in the ocean, when you start wading in, the waves can be rough, especially where they're breaking, and they can pull you down. You can lose your footing. If you make it past where the waves are breaking, the waters are calm. You can float, you can enjoy the water, you can swim. People who start in that path and go off plan often get those cravings back, and so they never make it into those deep, calm waters. They stay there at the edge of the shore, and they keep running back to shore, eating carbohydrate or going off plan because the cravings are so bad, and they're really just putting themselves in a place where they never can fully enjoy it. Credibility, thank goodness I don't have to do this research. Guys, we've got amazing folks who are on the front lines who are doing incredible work. Georgia Eads, I heard her at Low Carb USA in San Diego, and the work that she's doing with Alzheimer's. And Eric Westman, we are standing on shoulders of giants with some of these folks. Finney and Volek, which, by the way, I gave my physician their book, The Art and Science of Low Carbohydrate Living. I guess he's still wondering if it's sustainable. Sarah Halberg and Dominic D'Agostino, whose name I can't say. I think we have to focus on helpfulness and simplicity. This has to be an everyday diet. This has to be what I can feed my family on my budget and my timeline. And I could speak more, but I'm way out of time, and Jimmy's going to come and get me. Okay, 3 more minutes? Okay. And so I'll stop there. And if there are questions, thank you, guys.